Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Pastor Elizabeth, for letting me fill in on late notice and giving me the 20-minute block of time. You know, I was glad I was able to look at an article that was done about Bertha, my Aunt Bertha, on her 100th birthday, because it saves you all from having to listen to me describe the things I know about her past and how she got here. For many members of my family who weren't as geographically closely located, Aunt Bertha, to quote Winston Churchill, to paraphrase him, was a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. No one seemed we all knew about Aunt Bertha, we all knew of her, but many of them can't really recall exactly how she got here, but we all knew we were related to her. To fill in a couple blanks about her early life, which I think is important to keep in the context of who she was later in life, is she actually had 13 siblings. However, she was born on a farm in Sweden, and times were very hard. And 3 of her siblings died at very young ages. 1 in childbirth, I believe, and 2 before the age of 5. And I think that shaped perhaps her desire to seek a better life and become the woman that she was, because she certainly was a trailblazer. I don't think there were a lot of women, particularly, leaving their home country by themselves to start a new life. My Aunt Bertha is actually, I call her Aunt Bertha, she's my great aunt. She's my maternal grandmother's sister. And the sponsors in Chicago when she came here were my grandfather and my grandmother. My part of the, or our part of the family kicks in with Bertha when my mother, her niece, followed my father to California when he enlisted in the Marine Corps and was going through boot camp and infantry training. And Aunt Bertha let her stay at the Tramway Inn. And when I say let her stay there, that means let her work there and earn her keep and help out. And my mother recalls that as some of her more formative years, or months at any rate. Later, when my father went to Korea, they got stationed somewhere else, and he came back as the non-commissioned officer in charge of the Portsmouth Naval Prison in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So when he became stationed back at Camp Pendleton again, they stayed with Aunt Bertha at the Tramway Inn with my older brother. And I think it may have been a case of my father, who had been battle-tested in Korea and was the NCOIC of a prison, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. And that became, I believe, the first sparring match of a long relationship between the two. They certainly gave each other respect, and it was fun to watch them spar over the years. My niece, my brother's daughter, wanted me to, reminded me, and I'd already planned to. My father tells the story of my brother having pneumonia, or he calls it pneumonia, I'm sure, but staying at the Tramway Inn. And they would turn the heat up in the room to make it warm in the room, and Aunt Bertha would sneak in the middle of the night and turn the heat down, because that was a waste of heat. And my father would get up and turn it back up, and she'd be back in at about 2 a.m. and turn it back down again. And that went on for months, I think, and that speaks a little bit to certainly Bertha's hard upbringing and her frugality. She was a very, she understood the value of the dollar. I met Bertha, well, I don't recall meeting her, but she was 55 years old when I was born. So she was, by the time I was able to string together sentences, she was obviously well into her 60s. But she didn't share a lot of her previous life with me, but she did tell me a great deal, little life lessons, which have stayed with me forever. And I catch myself sometimes remembering in the smallest moments some of the lessons she taught me. I did stay with her at times. She was aghast that my brother and I could consume the amount of food and milk that we did while we were growing up. We would drink perhaps 1.5 gallons a day, and Aunt Bertha was determined to change that, and she would make us chew our milk. So we would take a glass full of milk and we had to chew it 25 times before we swallowed it. And all it did, I believe she learned, was that would lengthen the length of the meal, because we would still consume the same amount of milk. She was very generous, but she was generous in the Aunt Bertha way. She certainly took me to the zoo. I had birthday parties at the zoo. She was a member of the Zoological Society. She would stand up. When we settled here after my father retired, we were the ones that were probably both emotionally, family structure-wise, and geographically closest to Aunt Bertha. And that's why I think I was chosen to be the family rep, because I interacted with her so often, and she was such a fixture in my life. I remember her standing at the buffet table, whether it was the smorgasbord at Christmas or Thanksgiving, monitoring the food intake and admonishing us not to eat too much because we may have to save it for another day. And she made sure that we didn't take too much. I made the fatal mistake one time of not remembering her on her birthday. That was one thing my mother, Mary Ann, admonished me: make sure you send her a card. And I had a good excuse. I was in the Marine Corps in Korea, living in a tent, and apparently there was some discussion when I got back, and Aunt Bertha pulled me aside very pragmatically and said, "I understand you have a good excuse." That was my greeting back to the United States.